Have you ever felt a sudden heaviness around you, something you couldn't explain logically, yet it pressed on your mind and followed you through the day? Maybe you woke up feeling drained even though you slept well. Maybe your emotions shifted without reason. Or maybe every time a certain person entered your space, something inside you tightened, like your instincts were whispering a warning you kept ignoring. If any of these moments feel familiar, then what you're about to hear might show you a truth you never recognized before. My name doesn't matter. My identity doesn't matter. What matters is that for a period of my life, I was deeply involved in practices people often describe as witchcraft, energy manipulation, or spiritual influence. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies, not flashing lights, not spells flying through the air, but something far more subtle. Influence that works through intention, manipulation that works through emotions, control that works through energy, vibration, and the invisible tension between two people. I didn't grow up in that world. I wasn't forced into it. I walked toward it myself, thinking I was seeking healing, answers, and strength. But what I discovered was a world that thrives in silence. A world where people learn how to shift another person's emotions, thoughts, and reactions without ever speaking a word. A world where intentions, good or bad, can affect someone more deeply than physical actions ever could. The truth is simple. Most people who are under spiritual or energetic influence never realize it. The signs are small, quiet, easy to overlook, and the mind finds explanations for them: stress, exhaustion, coincidence, until the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. That is why this video exists, not to inspire paranoia, not to make you suspect everyone in your life, and not to encourage fear. This video is meant for awareness, so you can understand what subtle manipulation looks like, how spiritual influence actually works, and how to identify when someone's presence is affecting your energy, your thoughts, or your emotional stability. Before we go deeper, I want to make one thing absolutely clear. The signs I'm about to share are not meant to accuse anyone without reason. They are not proof of guilt. They are not justification to cut people out of your life blindly. A lot of experiences that feel spiritual can also come from emotional wounds, psychological stress, or simple human behavior. What matters is how the pattern forms, and what shifts inside you when someone's intention is directed toward you. Take a moment and think back to the last time you felt not yourself. Moment when your emotions felt heavier than usual, or your thoughts became clouded, or your energy suddenly dropped. Maybe it happened during an argument. Maybe it happened in silence. Maybe it happened the instant someone's eyes met yours. Hold that moment for a second. In the world I used to be part of, those tiny emotional shifts are not random. They are the first signs. Practitioners look for the smallest cracks where influence begins. A negative intention doesn't always show up as something dramatic. It often starts with something you feel rather than something you see. A heaviness in your chest, a pull on your energy, a sudden wave of doubt, a strange discomfort when a particular person speaks to you, touches you, or even thinks about you. This is not fantasy. This is the reality of subtle spiritual manipulation, and it happens more quietly than you can imagine. I want you to stay calm as you listen. This is not a horror story. This is not superstition. Everything I share comes from my personal journey and the experiences that eventually led me out of that dark world. There is nothing to fear here, as long as you understand what's happening and stay grounded. If you ever feel overwhelmed while listening, pause, breathe. Remind yourself that knowledge gives you strength. Awareness gives you protection. Fear only feeds the very thing you're trying to understand. You are here to learn, not to panic. And now, you're ready. Let's begin this journey, where I show you the signs hidden in plain sight, the ones most people ignore, and the ones ex-practitioners recognize instantly. This is the first step. When I look back at the person I used to be, it almost feels like I'm remembering someone else's life. I never planned to enter the world of witchcraft, manipulation, or spiritual influence. It didn't happen overnight, and it didn't begin with something dark. It began the same way it begins for so many people: curiosity, loneliness, and the desire to feel in control of a life that constantly felt out of my hands. I was not a child of darkness. I was a seeker. I was someone who wanted answers, someone who wanted relief from the emotional weight I carried. And when life becomes too heavy, we often start looking for power in the wrong places. That's exactly what I did. The first time I was introduced to those practices, it didn't look dangerous at all. It looked peaceful, calming, spiritual. There were books about energies, crystals, intentions, manifestation, and healing. It felt harmless, even helpful. I was told that I could remove negativity, heal emotional wounds, and connect with something greater than myself. And in those early moments, I believed every word. Nothing dark shows its real face in the beginning. It never comes to you as fear. It always comes as comfort. What pulled me deeper was not rituals or symbols. It was the feeling of control, the idea that my thoughts, my intentions, my focus could change things around me, could influence people, could shift situations. When you're someone who feels powerless in life, the promise of control becomes addictive, and slowly, the desire to heal turns into the desire to influence. The desire to influence turns into the desire to manipulate. And by the time you notice the shift, you're already standing somewhere you never thought you would. I didn't start with dark intentions, but darkness doesn't ask for your intention. It asks for your participation. Over time, I was introduced to deeper practices, ones that weren't written in books and weren't posted on the internet. These were personal teachings, passed quietly from one practitioner to another. These methods involved emotional hooks, energetic connections, silent pressure on someone's thoughts, and ways to weaken a person's natural intuition so they become easier to influence. I learned how emotions travel, how energies respond, and how vulnerable minds can be guided without a single word being spoken. And here is the truth: most people don't. No, the real spells are not the rituals. They are the intentions tied to emotion. They are the thoughts someone repeats with enough focus that they begin to press against another person's mental space. Most manipulation begins invisible, and that is why most people never see it coming. During those years, I saw how easily people could be affected without ever knowing. A person's mood could shift, their dreams could darken, their confidence could weaken, their intuition could get blocked. The human mind is far more open than we think, and those who know how to influence it rarely need anything more than focused intention and emotional leverage. The more I practiced, the more I realized something unsettling. The power I thought I had was not mine. It was borrowed. It came with a cost, one that didn't show immediately, but grew slowly, quietly, like a shadow that gets longer as the sun sets. My personality changed. My relationships grew cold. My mind felt heavier. And worst of all, I started losing the ability to feel genuine emotions. Manipulation replaces authenticity. You cannot manipulate others without being drained yourself. The breaking point came when I realized that I was no longer controlling the energy. I was being controlled by it. That darkness, that subtle influence I once used on others, began circling back into my own life. The same heaviness, confusion, and emotional distortion I created in others began happening to me. It felt like I had opened a door I could not close. Leaving that world was not easy. People think you can just walk away, but you can't. When you practice manipulation on a spiritual level, you tie threads that don't break just because you regret them. I had to rebuild my mind, cleanse my emotions, and disconnect from everything I once believed gave me power. And once I stepped out, once I finally saw clearly again, I realized something that changed everything. The signs I felt during my years inside that world were the same signs people feel when someone is affecting them today. And that is why I share this. Because the things I once used are the very things people around you may be using, maybe intentionally, maybe unconsciously. But either way, the signs are real. In the next section, I will tell you what bewitching actually is and how it silently works. There are moments in life when something inside you shifts so quietly that you barely notice it. A heaviness in your chest, a wave of sadness that comes without a story, a sense of pressure that appears the moment you wake up or just before you fall asleep. These moments seem normal at first, easy to blame on stress, sleep, mood, or life. But when these moments repeat in a pattern, when they appear out of nowhere and refuse to leave, that is when you must pay attention. The first sign that someone may be influencing your energy is emotional heaviness. Not sadness with a reason, not stress with a cause. I'm talking about a sudden emotional weight that drops on you as if someone placed a shadow over your heart. You could be perfectly fine one moment, and the next your mood collapses. Inside the world I came from, this heaviness is one of the oldest indicators of manipulation. When someone directs intention, jealousy, resentment, or spiritual pressure toward you, it often lands emotionally before it affects anything else. The second sign appears right behind the first. unexplained guilt, or fear. You start feeling like you've done something wrong, even when you haven't. You feel nervous without knowing why. Your thoughts become restless. Your inner voice becomes shaky. It's as if someone gently presses a hand on your mind, not enough for you to panic, but enough for you to lose your internal balance. I once saw people use this exact shift to make others compliant, because when a person feels guilty without cause, they become easier to influence. Another sign hides in your dreams. When someone is affecting you spiritually or energetically, your dreams don't stay the same. You may start having repetitive nightmares. You may see dark places, shadows, or aggressive energy. Sometimes you wake up gasping or feeling watched. In my past life, practitioners believed the dream state was one of the easiest ways to access someone's emotional field, because your defenses are weak when you sleep. If you've been dreaming strangely without explanation, your subconscious may be reacting to something your conscious mind has ignored. Then there is something even more subtle: pressure during sleep. Many people describe waking up as if something was holding them down, sitting on their chest or freezing their body. Some call it sleep paralysis. And yes, sometimes it is just that. But there are moments when this experience comes after emotional heaviness, after nightmares, after sudden fear. When these signs connect, something deeper might be happening. The next sign is one most people overlook because it feels too irrational to take seriously. It's the discomfort you feel around a specific person. Even if that person has done nothing openly wrong, you may feel uneasy when they sit next to you. You may feel tired when they speak. You may suddenly get sad, nervous, or irritated for no identifiable reason. This doesn't always mean they are intentionally influencing you. Sometimes their energy is naturally heavy, but sometimes that subtle discomfort is the first whisper of a deeper manipulation. I remember watching people use emotional projection as a tool. They didn't need rituals. They didn't need candles. They only needed intention. If they wanted someone to feel confused, they shaped that feeling inside themselves and directed it outward. If they wanted someone to feel drawn to them, they imagined the pull and let it flow. Most victims never realized where these sudden emotional changes came from, because the shifts felt like their own feelings. Another sign is sudden emotional reversal. One moment you feel confident, the next you feel doubtful. One moment you feel peaceful, the next you're irritated. These inner storms can happen naturally, of course, but when they consistently occur after interacting with the same person, or when they strike at the same moments each day, something external may be touching your emotional field. All these signs, heaviness, fear, nightmares, discomfort, unexplained pressure, seem unconnected at first. But in my old world, these were the first things we looked for when determining whether someone was being influenced. Emotional patterns reveal more than people think. Your energy reacts before your mind understands. Your body senses things your thoughts dismiss. When something dark or manipulative enters your personal space, the first place it leaves fingerprints is inside your emotions. If any of these signs sound familiar, it does not automatically mean someone is targeting you. But it does mean something in your life is affecting you more deeply than you realized. Something is pushing against your natural balance. And recognizing these signs is the first step toward understanding what may be happening behind the scenes. Now that you've understood the emotional signs, it's time to move deeper into the psychological and behavioral changes that reveal even more. There are moments in life when you feel something shifting inside you, but because it happens quietly, you convince yourself it's nothing. You call it stress, overthinking, bad mood, emotional imbalance. But the truth is, the human spirit doesn't react without reason. Something moves it. Something touches it. And sometimes that something is not just life, it's influence. When a person is silently affecting your spiritual or emotional state, the very first signs appear inside you, not outside, not in your environment, not in your relationships, inside you. These signs are so personal, so intimate, that you often dismiss them as your own thoughts or your own emotions. But they are not random. They are signals, small warnings from your inner world. Let's begin with the most common one: emotional heaviness. This heaviness doesn't come from sadness or pain. It's a strange weight, almost like someone placed an invisible blanket over your chest. You feel slower. Your thoughts feel heavier. You feel like your spirit is dimming even though nothing in your life has changed. What makes this heaviness suspicious is when it appears suddenly and disappears just as suddenly. And even more telling, when it shows up, right after interacting with a particular person, maybe after a conversation, a message, a call, a meeting. You don't always realize it immediately. But if you pay attention, you start to notice a pattern. This weight enters with them and leaves when they leave. Another sign is unexplained fear or discomfort around someone. It's not the kind of fear that makes you run. It's subtle. A slight tightening in your stomach, a tension in your shoulders, a sharpness in your breathing, a discomfort you can't justify with logic. Maybe that person smiles. Maybe they behave normally. Maybe they speak softly, but something deep inside your spirit flinches. Influence works through energy, not expressions. Your intuition senses what your mind cannot see. Then there are the dreams, recurring, disturbing, confusing dreams that appear, especially after you've been thinking about someone or interacting with them. These dreams are rarely clear. They may not be nightmares, but they leave you with a strange emotional residue. You wake up with a feeling that something touched your mind while you slept. Dreams are sensitive to influences because your defenses are lowest at night, and when someone tries to affect your energy, your dreams often react before your waking mind does. Another personal sign is the sudden loss of emotional balance. You're fine one moment and the next. You're overwhelmed with sadness, irritation, or fear, not because something happened, but because something shifted inside you. You may find yourself doubting your worth, questioning your decisions, or feeling guilty for no reason. These emotional swings don't come from your mind. They are triggered. Someone's intention can stir your emotions to weaken your judgment, cloud your clarity, or pull you into confusion. There are also moments when your body feels something before your thoughts do. Pressure on your chest while resting, a sudden chill on your back, a wave of fatigue right after thinking of someone. This physical shift may last seconds or minutes, but it leaves a deep impression. Spiritual influence often travels through the body first, because that's where your energy is stored. Another deeply personal sign is the feeling of being watched without anyone watching you. You may sit alone in your room and suddenly feel as though someone's thoughts are touching you, their mind reaching out to you. Influence, especially intentional influence, often feels like a silent gaze, a presence you cannot see but can unmistakably sense. And then there is a very subtle, very dangerous sign, the sudden change in your inner voice. You start hearing thoughts that don't sound like your own. Not literal voices, internal thoughts that push you toward fear, self-doubt, weakness, or confusion. These thoughts appear like your own internal dialogue, but the tone is unfamiliar. Influence often speaks through the mind because your mind is the easiest doorway. But the strangest sign of all is when your spirit reacts before your brain does. Your intuition senses a threat while your logic finds no evidence. Your heart whispers warnings your mind tries to ignore. This is not paranoia. This is awareness. Influence is invisible, and your spirit detects it instantly, even when your brain is still catching up. These personal signs are not accidents. They are the earliest signals that someone may be touching your emotional or spiritual field. Most people ignore them. Most people try to explain them away. But the truth is simple. Energy doesn't lie. Your inner world speaks before anything else does. When these signs appear repeatedly, consistently, or specifically around one person, there is always a reason. And now that you understand the personal signals, it's time to move deeper. The mind. That is where the second layer of signs begins. Quiet, subtle, and far more dangerous. You now understand how the emotional, mental, and environmental shifts begin. You've heard the subtle signs, the symptoms that most people ignore, and the patterns that quietly reveal when something is influencing your life. But the real question, the question everyone secretly wants the answer to, is this. How do you identify the person behind it? How do you recognize who is affecting your energy, your clarity, your emotions? How do you see the source when the influence itself remains invisible? Let me tell you something uncomfortable but true. In my past life, the greatest power wasn't in rituals or symbols. It was in understanding human behavior. The ones who manipulated energy learned very quickly that it's never the spell that matters. It's the connection. Influence travels on emotional bonds, on attention, on trust, on fear, and even on obsession. And because of that, identifying the source isn't about looking for someone with candles and dark rooms. It's about noticing patterns in people, patterns that tell you far more than any supernatural sign ever could. Think about your own life for a moment. Think of the moments when you felt your energy suddenly collapse. Think of the days you felt mentally foggy right after interacting with someone. Think of conversations that left you confused, drained, or strangely guilty. Think of the people you instinctively avoid but don't know why. There is always a clue hidden in those moments. A clue that points to the person who is affecting you, intentionally or unintentionally. In my experience, the person influencing you is often someone who knows your emotional weak points. Not necessarily a close friend, not necessarily family, but someone who has access to your inner space, your fears, your secrets, your insecurities. Manipulation rarely works on strangers. It works on the people who have studied you enough to understand what pulls you down and what keeps you stuck. One of the clearest signs is the shift you feel around them. Your body reacts before your mind does. You feel heaviness, anxiety, or discomfort when they speak to you, or even when they simply stand close. You may not understand why. You may even tell yourself you're overthinking. But your energy knows before your logic does. Another sign is the way your mood changes immediately after interacting with them. Notice the timing. If every single time you meet this person, something inside you tightens, your chest feels heavy, your mind feels foggy, or your emotions feel unstable, that is not imagination. That is resonance. Energy reacts faster than words, and if someone is tied to the influence around you, your emotional field will show it long before your mind accepts it. There is also the way this person responds to your progress. People who drain or manipulate energy rarely celebrate your growth. They become strange, silent, or uncomfortable when good things happen to you. They show subtle jealousy. Their compliments feel hollow. Their expressions shift in small, quick ways that you almost miss. They might not attack you openly, but something in them resists your happiness. Pay attention to this. It is one of the strongest indicators. Another pattern is guilt. People who influence your emotions try to keep you emotionally tied to them. Notice if there is someone who always makes you feel guilty for pulling away, for setting boundaries, or simply for choosing your peace. Notice if someone gets irritated when you distance yourself. Notice if they create emotional pressure the moment you try to step back. This reaction isn't always conscious, manipulation, but it is a sign of emotional binding, the same binding that spiritual manipulation uses as its foundation. Look at the conversations they initiate. Do they constantly make you doubt yourself? Do they plant small seeds of fear? Do they question your decisions in a way that weakens your confidence? Do they remind you of your past mistakes more than your potential? Energy influence often hides inside words that seem innocent on the surface but leave wounds that linger for hours or days. And here's something most people overlook. The person affecting you often shows unusual interest in your emotional state. They want to know when you're weak, when you're tired, when you're stressed. They sense vulnerability quickly because manipulation thrives on it. When I was inside that world, we learned that emotional vulnerability was the doorway. And the person influencing you, whether they know what they're doing or not, always seems to appear at that doorway right when your guard drops. So how do you identify the one bewitching you? You watch how your energy responds. You observe the emotional shifts. You notice the timing. You pay attention to the discomfort your intuition whispers. Your body, your spirit, your emotions, they all react long before your mind accepts the truth. And once you start connecting these patterns, the picture begins to clear. The fog lifts. The emotional noise softens. And suddenly, the person you once overlooked becomes the person you finally see. Now that you know how to identify the source, let's go deeper. Sometimes the signs of bewitching or spiritual interference don't show up inside you at all. They show up around you, inside your environment, inside your routine, and inside the flow of your everyday life. These are the signs most people ignore, because they look like ordinary bad luck or coincidence. But when I was inside the world of spiritual manipulation, these external shifts were often the strongest indicators that something was affecting a person from the outside. Let me take you into that world for a moment. Picture your life as a river. Some days the water flows smoothly. Some days the current slows down. And some days it becomes completely disrupted, as if invisible stones were dropped into it. When a spiritual influence or energetic attack touches someone, it rarely begins with loud, dramatic events. Instead, it starts by disrupting the natural flow of their life, just enough to make them stumble, doubt themselves, and lose balance. The first thing many people experience is a sudden streak of bad luck that appears out of nowhere. One thing goes wrong, then another, and then another. Not big disasters, but small, Consistent disturbances that make your path feel heavier than usual. Maybe your plans keep failing even when you've done everything right. Maybe every time you try to move forward, something blocks you, a delay, a mistake, a disappointment that makes no sense. When I practiced manipulation, this was one of the easiest ways to influence someone, not by hurting them directly, but by disrupting the things around them until their confidence broke. A spiritually targeted person often feels like life suddenly turned against them, even when nothing major has changed. Another sign appears inside your home, the place where you should feel the safest. You might notice the atmosphere feeling heavier than usual. Not sad, not scary, just heavy, like something invisible is sitting in the room. Many people describe it as a pressure they can't fully explain. Sometimes it's a silence that feels too thick. Sometimes the air feels different, as if joy doesn't move as freely as it used to. This heaviness isn't always spiritual, of course. But when it appears suddenly and refuses to go away, it should not be ignored. Then there is the pattern of things breaking in unusual clusters. Objects falling for no reason. Electronics glitching or shutting down even when they're in perfect condition. Lights flickering. Devices suddenly draining battery at strange moments. I'm not talking about one broken appliance. I'm talking about multiple disturbances happening, close together and enough that you start questioning why so many things are going wrong all at once. Inside the practices I once belonged to, manipulating a person's environment was considered a quieter form of influence. Instead of touching the person directly, you disturb the things that surround them. When the environment becomes unstable, the person becomes unstable. You might also notice tension in your relationships, misunderstandings, conflicts, or emotional distance that seems to appear overnight. You don't know why it's happening, but suddenly communication becomes harder. Loved ones seem more irritated than usual. People misinterpret your words. Even small conversations turn into arguments. Spiritual interference often attacks the connections that keep a person strong. Breaking harmony around you weakens you more than breaking you directly. There is also the emotional atmosphere of your space. You may wake up feeling fine, but the moment you walk into a certain room or area, your mood shifts. Maybe you suddenly feel sad, angry, irritated, or anxious without any logical reason. Many people think their emotions changed because of stress or fatigue, but sometimes the environment itself holds energy that doesn't belong to you. When I was involved in spiritual practices, one of the first things we learned was how to leave energy imprints behind, emotional fingerprints that linger even after the person is gone. Another subtle but powerful sign is the feeling of being watched or observed. Even when you're alone, it's not paranoia. It's a sense that the atmosphere around you is too aware, too focused on you. Many victims describe it as a presence that doesn't feel harmful immediately, but doesn't feel neutral either. When I was a practitioner, we often used intention to project awareness into someone's space, a silent form of influence that people feel, even if they don't understand it. These signs in your environment are some of the most ignored indicators, because they seem separate from you. But your outer world and inner world are connected more deeply than you think. When something interferes with your energy, it eventually spills outward. And when something interferes with your surroundings, it eventually spills inward. If your environment feels disrupted, unstable, or unusually heavy, if objects keep breaking, plans keep failing, relationships feel strained, and your home no longer feels like a place of peace, it might not be an accident. It might be the environment reacting to an influence you haven't yet recognized. And now that you're starting to see these signs, we can move to the next part, understanding who might be behind the interference. Now that you understand the emotional, mental, and environmental signs, it's time to answer the question that people fear the most. How do you actually identify the person behind it? Not through guessing, not through paranoia, but through patterns that repeat themselves so consistently, so quietly, that once you see them, you can never unsee them again. When I was still involved in the practices I left behind, identifying the target was easy. But identifying the source, the person influencing or draining someone's energy, was even easier. Because people leave fingerprints on your life without realizing it. Not physical fingerprints, but energetic ones, emotional ones, behavioral ones. And if you look carefully at your own experiences, you will start noticing those same invisible fingerprints too. The first sign shows up through your reactions. Pay attention to how your mind feels when a certain person enters your space. It doesn't matter if they're smiling, acting friendly, or pretending to care. Your energy notices things before your logic does. You may suddenly feel nervous, restless, irritated, or emotionally heavy around someone you've known for years. And you may brush it off telling yourself, "I'm just overthinking." But your energy rarely lies. If your internal state changes instantly in the presence of someone, that shift is a clue. Maybe not the whole answer, but a clue that something in their energy doesn't align with yours. Another subtle sign comes from how they respond to your progress. Remember, manipulation, both emotional and spiritual, comes from people who don't want you to grow beyond their control. Watch how a person reacts when something good happens in your life. Do they genuinely celebrate your success? Or do they change the subject quickly? Do they become unusually quiet? Do they make your achievements feel small? Their words may sound normal, but their energy reveals the truth. I learned long ago that people who can influence you, spiritually or emotionally, do not want you to rise above their grip. Success threatens them. Growth scares them. Independence weakens their control. Then there are people who know your weaknesses too well. Not because you told them, but because they learn to observe the cracks in your emotional armor. They know exactly what triggers you. They know how to make you feel guilty. They know how to make you doubt yourself. They know what to say when they want to soften you, and what to say when they want to break you. When someone always seems to hit the right spot, when they always know how to pull your emotions in a certain direction, that is not coincidence, it is intention. Whether conscious or unconscious, it is intention. You may also notice that your energy feels worst right after interacting with a specific person. Their presence lingers. Their conversations replay in your mind longer than they should. Something they said echoes in your thoughts even when you don't want it to. And after every interaction, big or small, you feel drained, like a part of you was taken without permission. In spiritual communities, we used to call this residue, piece of someone's intention sticking to your emotional field. And residue never lies. Pay attention, too, to how a person behaves when you try to pull away or set boundaries. People who have no control over you don't care if you take space. They don't try to keep you close. They don't panic when you say no. But those who are influencing you intentionally or unintentionally will react very differently. They may guilt trip you. They may suddenly become overly sweet. They may play the victim. They may remind you of everything they've done for you. They may try to make you feel ashamed for needing space. Anytime distance makes someone uncomfortable, there is a reason. Another pattern is subtle manipulation disguised as care. They may insert small comments like, "I'm just worried about you," or "I know you better than anyone," or "You're not thinking straight." These words sound caring, but they chip away at your confidence. They make you dependent. They weaken your sense of identity. This is one of the most common psychological gateways for energetic influence. When someone repeatedly positions themselves as the only one who understands you, they aren't supporting you, they're claiming ownership over your emotional world. And finally, pay attention to the person whose presence makes your intuition whisper. Not shout, not scream, just whisper. A quiet inner voice that says, "Something is off here." Intuition is not a dramatic force. It is subtle. And when it speaks, it usually speaks about people whose intentions don't match their behavior. Identifying a source is not about fear. It's about clarity. It's about noticing patterns that were always there, waiting for you to finally see them. And once you see them, the fog begins to clear. You start connecting the dots. And slowly, the person who has been influencing your energy becomes visible. In the next section, I will reveal how ex-practitioners identify the source using deeper spiritual, emotional, and energetic cues, techniques most people have never heard before. When I finally stepped out of the world I was part of, the question people asked me most was simple but terrifying. How do you actually know who is influencing you? And the truth is, the process isn't dramatic. It's not about calling spirits, drawing symbols, or performing rituals. It's far simpler than people imagine, but far more disturbing once you understand how it works. Real detection begins with something subtle. Patterns. Not physical patterns, energy patterns. Emotional patterns. Behavioral patterns. These are changes that appear inside you long before something shows on the outside. Back when I practiced, we were taught to watch these patterns. Not with eyes, but with awareness. Every person leaves an emotional footprint. Every interaction leaves an energetic signature. The moment someone tries to manipulate, influence, or drain another person, that signature becomes sharp, distorted, or sticky. Yes, sticky. Like emotional glue, and people who've lived in that world recognize that sensation instantly. One of the first techniques I learned was to observe emotional shifts that happened too quickly. If someone's presence could pull you into fear, guilt, or confusion within seconds, even without conflict, even without conversation, that meant their intention carried weight. Energy always travels before words do. When a manipulator thinks of you with negative intention, your body feels it long before your mind catches up. Former practitioners learn to sense this imbalance the way some people can sense a change in weather before a storm arrives. There's another method people rarely talk about, something I once used without realizing the harm it caused. It's something called an imprint trace. Every person who focuses intensely on you, whether with obsession, jealousy, anger, or desire, creates a tiny imprint in your emotional field. You might feel it as sudden heaviness in your chest, a shift in your breathing, or a strange pressure in your mind. You may not understand it, but you feel it. And ex-practitioners are trained to follow that imprint back to the emotional source. It's like hearing a faint echo and knowing exactly which direction it came from. Sometimes the source reveals itself through timing. If your mood drops only after interacting with a certain person, if confusion appears only after you speak to them, if anxiety sharpens only when they message you, that timing is not accidental. Intentional energy always leaves a trail. Those who lived in the dark know how to read that trail as easily as others read a map. Another unsettling method is what we call thought. Disruption cues. This one is powerful. When someone is influencing you, your thoughts feel slightly misaligned, like they're not fully yours. You might be having a normal day, feeling calm, and suddenly a wave of doubt or guilt hits you, and that emotion is strangely connected to one specific person. Your brain doesn't know why, but your energy remembers. The mind may be confused, but the body always knows the truth. There were even times when identity became painfully clear through dreams. When someone focuses on you intensely, especially with negative or manipulative intent, your subconscious reacts. You may dream of them standing far away, watching you silently. Or their face may appear blurred, but their presence unmistakable. Ex-practitioners know how to read these dreams not as fantasy, but as emotional communication. The subconscious never lies, but the most accurate method, the one every experienced practitioner relies on, is what we call resonance reaction. It's simple. Your energy changes when the source comes near, even if they haven't spoken, even if they pretend to be friendly, even if they act innocent. Your body reacts before your mind understands. You might feel chills, tightness, irritation, sudden tiredness, or an emotional dip that makes absolutely no sense. That reaction is not your imagination, it's recognition. Let me tell you a truth most people don't know. Every manipulator reveals themselves through your discomfort. Silence exposes them. Distance exposes them. Calm exposes them. The moment you step back emotionally, their intentions become louder and clearer. And that is how ex-practitioners identify the source. Not by magic, not by rituals, but by understanding the language of energy, because manipulation, influence, and spiritual interference always speak louder in silence than in sound. Now that you know how identification works, we can move forward into the next part, understanding the early warning signs hidden inside your daily life. There is something most people don't know about spiritual influence. It always leaves fingerprints, invisible to ordinary eyes, but unmistakable to someone who has walked through the darker side of spiritual practices. When you're caught in the middle of confusion, fear, emotional heaviness, or unexplained discomfort, you only see the symptoms. But someone who has lived inside that world knows how to trace those symptoms back to the source, the person who might be influencing your energy, intention, or state of mind. When I first began to step out of witchcraft, I realized something shocking. The signs were never random. They followed patterns, and every pattern pointed back to someone. Someone carrying intention, someone projecting energy, someone attaching emotional weight to you, sometimes knowingly, sometimes unknowingly. But the effect was always the same. The first thing ex-practitioners look for is emotional distortion. Human emotion has a natural rhythm, a natural rise and fall. But when someone is influencing you, that rhythm breaks. You feel emotions that don't match the situation or don't belong to you at all. It might be sudden guilt when you did nothing wrong, sudden fear when there is no threat, sudden sadness that enters your mind like a fog. The key is not the emotion itself, it's the timing. Witches watch when the emotional shift happens. If the shift appears right after you think of a certain person, or meet them, or receive a message from them, that moment becomes a clue. The second thing we observe is energetic pull. Everyone carries an energy signature. When someone is focusing on you with strong intention, good or bad, your body feels it before your mind understands it. The chest tightens. The breath becomes shallow. The skin reacts, not because of anxiety, but because your energy field is responding to someone else's influence. Witches track these reactions. We notice who your body reacts to, even if your mind tries to ignore it. The body never lies. Then comes the deeper layer, the emotional imprint left after interactions. If you notice that every time you meet a specific person, your day collapses, your mood sinks, or your thoughts take a negative turn, that person becomes a potential source. Practitioners analyze patterns, not moments. A moment could be coincidence. But a pattern? Patterns don't lie. Patterns tell a story. In the darker practices I once knew, people used something we called intention hooks. They weren't spells, not in the way movies show them. They were concentrated emotional intentions directed at someone strong enough to create a spiritual attachment. Love, obsession, jealousy, fear, any strong emotion can act as a hook. So when someone thinks about you intensely, with negative desire or manipulative intentions, that energy doesn't disappear. It travels, it lands. And if you're sensitive, it hits you like a weight you can't shake. Witches recognize these hooks by observing which person holds unusual influence over your emotional state. Not influence through conversation or action, but influence through presence. You feel pulled toward them or pushed away from them without any logical reason. Your mind may not understand the connection, but your spirit does. That instinctive push or pull is another clue. Another method we use is observing the gaps in your clarity. When someone is influencing you, your intuition gets cloudy around them. You can see everyone's intentions clearly except theirs. Your judgment becomes weak specifically about them. You make excuses for them without knowing why. You question yourself, not them. This selective confusion is a red flag we never ignore. Practitioners also pay attention to dreams. The subconscious mind is the first place spiritual influence leaks into. If the same person appears repeatedly in your dreams during times of emotional heaviness, that is not random. Dreams don't lie. They reveal what your conscious mind tries to avoid. Sometimes, the dream atmosphere around that person feels dark or uncomfortable, even if the person themselves appears calm. That contrast is a sign. But the strongest clue of all is this. The person who affects you the most is usually the one you hesitate to question, the one your mind avoids thinking negatively about, the one your emotions protect even when your body feels unsafe around them. Darkness often hides behind familiarity. Influence often hides behind closeness. And spiritual manipulation often hides behind the person you never expected. When identifying the source, witches do not use fear, aggression, or assumptions. We follow patterns, reactions, instincts, and emotional signatures. We look at who benefits from your confusion, who feeds from your weakness, and who gains from your emotional imbalance. Because influence always has a motive. And although motives differ, jealousy, control, attachment, revenge, the trail they leave behind is always traceable. Once you understand these signs, once you learn to see the fingerprints behind your emotional shifts, nothing remains hidden anymore. The darkness loses its edge. The manipulator loses their power, and you begin to reclaim what was silently taken from you. As we reach the final moments of this journey, I want you to pause for a moment and notice how you feel right now. Maybe you feel clarity, as if certain patterns in your life suddenly make more sense. Maybe you feel a bit unsettled, because the signs you once ignored now appear unmistakably clear. Or maybe you feel lighter, simply because you finally have words for experiences you were silently carrying for years. Whatever you're feeling, let me tell you this: awareness is the first step toward freedom. Everything you have heard in this video was not meant to frighten you. It was meant to open your eyes. Darkness thrives where there is confusion. Manipulation thrives where there is silence. Influence thrives where there is ignorance. But the moment you begin to understand what's happening, the moment you see the patterns instead of just feeling them, the spell begins to break. Not literally, not magically, but emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. You don't have to fight anyone. You don't have to confront anyone. You don't have to accuse anyone. You simply have to see, because the truth is, once you recognize the signs, the person who was silently affecting you, intentionally or unintentionally, loses their power. Influence only works in the shadows. The moment light touches it, its strength dissolves. When you understand your emotions, when you observe your reactions, when you notice who drains you and who restores you, you are no longer a target. You become someone who cannot be manipulated easily. You may be wondering, now that I know the signs, what do I do next? The answer is simple. You take back your space. You protect your emotional boundaries. You pay attention to the signals your mind and body send you. You stop explaining away the heaviness you feel around certain people. And most importantly, you stop doubting yourself. Your intuition is not dramatic. It is not imaginary. It is your inner alarm system, one that activates long before your conscious mind understands what's happening. If someone's presence creates anxiety that makes no logical sense, if someone's intentions feel friendly on the surface but draining underneath, if someone's influence pulls you emotionally in directions you never chose, your intuition is trying to communicate with you. Don't silence it. Now, as we wrap up this video, I want to leave you with a message that comes from a place of truth, experience, and transformation. You are stronger than the energy trying to influence you. You are not weak. You are not helpless. You are not someone who can be controlled forever. The fact that you chose to watch this video to the end already shows that a part of you refuses to stay in the dark. A part of you wants clarity. A part of you is ready to reclaim your life. And you are doing exactly that right now. Before this video ends, take a moment to reflect on everything you heard. Which sign resonated with you the most? Which part felt personal? Which moment felt like a mirror? Your answer matters, not just for you, but for others who may be silently going through something similar. When you share your experience, it helps people realize they're not alone. And sometimes one shared sentence can give someone else courage to finally see the truth in their own life. So when this video finishes, scroll down and share one thing. Which sign did you feel the deepest? Not to expose anyone, not to accuse anyone, but to acknowledge your own story. And before you leave, I want to give you a glimpse of what comes next. In the next video, I will break down something even more subtle, something far more widespread, and something that affects people without them ever noticing. Silent spiritual attacks, not dramatic incidents, not supernatural events, but the slow, invisible drain that affects thoughts, emotions, relationships, sleep, motivation, and sometimes even destiny. If you want to understand what silent spiritual attacks feel like, how they work, how to recognize them before they take hold, and how to stop them before they start, then don't miss the next chapter of this journey. For now, remember, awareness is your first shield, knowledge is your second, and your intuition, strong, ancient, deeply built within you, is your third. No one can overpower a person who can see the truth. This is your moment of awakening. This is your turning point. And this is where your clarity begins.